On behalf of my colleagues at M-Trade, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's luncheon, where I get to introduce our fireside chat with keynote speaker Jewel Burks Solomon and our moderator Ryan Miller. But first, a brief commercial. M-Trade provides we provide software and services to large financial institutions to help increase the speed and financial performance of their purchases, surveillance, and disposition of non-agency residential mortgages. No, it's a mouthful. We're a proud Mississippi-based company based in Oxford. We've got over 200 employees now, and next April we will celebrate our 10th year anniversary. And we're thrilled to be here. Now on to the main event. Jewel Burks Solomon is managing partner at Collab Capital, a $125 million early stage venture capital firm she launched to fund founders driving innovation across critical sectors: economic mobility, care access, and community infrastructure. Prior to leading Collab, Jewel was head of Google for Startups US, where she created initiatives that have deployed over $50 million in non-dilutive capital to 500 plus businesses since 2020. Jewel's passion for leveling the playing field in the innovation ecosystem was born from her own experience. She was the founder and CEO of HeartPick, an AI startup that was acquired by Amazon in 2016, which streamlined the purchase of maintenance and repair parts using computer visionary technology. Our friend Ashley, we know that. Jewel serves on the boards of Spelman College, the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta, Call Rail, and the Center for American Entrepreneurship. She's a member of Class 29 at Kaufman Fellows and the 2019 class of Henry Crown Fellows within the Aspen Global Leadership Network at the Aspen Institute. She received a bachelor's degree in business administration from Howard University, and she currently resides in the ATL with her husband and son. Ryan Miller currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer at the Oxford-Lafayette County Economic Development Foundation. After serving 3 years as the Executive Director of the Mississippi Office of Workforce Development, also known as Accelerate Mississippi, Ryan now leads an economic development efforts for a vibrant and fast-growing community in the American South. He is a strong operations professional with an undergraduate degree in international studies from the Croft Institute and a law degree from the University of Mississippi. I will present Jewel and Ryan.
Well, it's a privilege to be here. Jewel, thank you. I know it was a late night for you.
A little
bit, but we're grateful. And, everybody should breathe a sigh of relief. And you don't know this, but Plan B, if you were not to have made it here, I was going to sing and dance during lunch. I think this will be far more informative and probably life-affirming as opposed to what I was going to do to try to kill time for us. But we are grateful you're here, and we're grateful to be able to share some of this time together. I set this out with Gerard Gibbert on Super Talk just a little while ago. One of the things I appreciate about this event is that it does bring together both those individuals that have ideas that they want to see realized. Great ideas, innovative ideas, creative ideas, but it also brings people here who want to help resource and equip those dreamers with whether it's financial backing, whether it's mentorship. It's a way to help breathe life and give life to those ideas. And you've been in both of those seats before, are in both of those seats. And so I would love for you to kind of help us understand. You've had great success in both of those contexts. Where did that spirit of entrepreneurs come from for you?
Sure. First, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here in Mississippi. I've been telling folks this is my second time in Jackson in the last 2 weeks, so it must be something drawing me in. Super excited to be here. But that spirit of entrepreneurship was really born out of my family. So my parents, my grandparents, all entrepreneurs. people, trying to get them to talk to my mom. My dad took on family businesses that my grandfather started in Mobile, Alabama. So at a young age, I was playing cashier in the service station. We had a Subway for a minute, laundromat. So I was working in those businesses at a very young age. I caught the bug and knew that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. Didn't know exactly what kind of entrepreneur I would be, but always knew that would be my path.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I am recognizing that for a lot of entrepreneurs or innovators, they have people in their lives, family members often, that exhibit some of those traits. This is a lot of hard work, there's a lot of determination, you have to put your neck out there, there's risk involved. What were some of the lessons that you learned from watching your mom and dad and your family take that risk and certainly put themselves out there to be small business owners? What were some of the lessons that you learned from them?
Yeah, I saw it all. I saw the highs. My mom was really successful in her agency certain years, so we would get to go on trips. If you sell enough insurance, you can go to, Bermuda, and that was really great when I was growing up. But I also saw the times where, the money wasn't there, the sales weren't there, and it was really hard, and we had to sacrifice. On my dad's side, I saw what happens in family businesses sometimes, where first generation has a lot of success, and the turnover or handoff to the next generation doesn't always work out. So I saw my dad lose businesses that my grandfather had worked so hard to build, and not necessarily because of anything that he did, but because times changed, prices went up, different dynamics impacted his ability to hold on to some of those businesses. So I got the full kind of spectrum of what is required, the hard work, the late nights, the early mornings. It was ingrained in me at a very early age that you can achieve a lot, but it's going to take work, and it's also going to take community. One thing that I love that I learned from both my parents and my grandparents was the fact that they were building businesses in communities and they cared about those communities. So, they were working and selling products and, trying to get people to support their businesses, but they were also showing up for their communities, whether it be in the church, whether it be doing clothing drives. My dad, as he transitioned out of our family businesses, he became a director of the Boys and Girls Club in Mobile. So he does an annual Thanksgiving event every single year. So he's doing it for the past probably 20 years to feed people in need during the holidays. And so I saw all of that, and that really kind of shaped the type of entrepreneur that I wanted to be, and the motivation I had behind the work that I do.
And I appreciate you sharing that as well. I think Mississippi, historically, year after year, is ranked as one of the most philanthropic, one of the most giving states in the country, which I think is a wonderful thing. And what you're talking about is how do I take my successes and then reinvest it in people, giving to others, equipping others. There is a certain philanthropic spirit that goes along with being an entrepreneur that I think is really palpable. And so I appreciate you sharing that. You took those traits of hard work, of being community-minded, the successes that you saw your parents and your family have, as well as some of the challenges they experienced. How did you translate that into early success for yourself? What were some of the early successes that you've had learning from people like your mom and dad?
Yeah, I built a track record of success pretty early on. I can remember my first win was I entered an essay contest when I was like 12 years old. It was through, I played tennis during the summers, and it was through the USTA. They had a kids essay contest. And I was the national winner for my age group. Got flown out. My dad and I got to go to New York to go to the US Open. We got to see Serena and Venus play. This is a long time ago, obviously, but got to see them play, and got to go to a Broadway show. It was my first time in New York. And that was like the spark for me that showed me, wow, okay, Mobile is great, Nashville's great, but there's a big world out there, and it really motivated me to think, okay, what do I need to do to show up in places like New York and continue to compete on a national level? And so that was kind of the first spark for me, winning that competition. And after that, I just continued to try to understand what does it take to be the very best in whatever I'm doing. And that kind of went on to, when I went to college, I went to Howard University. I was really really excited. Legalese one, they went to Howard as well. So, went to Howard, wanted to get the best internship, and at that time it was interning on Wall Street. That was kind of what was promoted in the School of Business. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna get the best Wall Street internship. So intern at Goldman Sachs my freshman year. And then the next year, everyone was talking about technology. So I interned at Google. And that's what really led me into the technology field. So, from an early age, kind of through today, I've been motivated by being the best, competing on a national level, and understanding what that means also for my community. And when I go into those rooms and can open those doors, who else can I bring along?
Yeah, and I think that's there's a common denominator, even in spending time reading your bio and kind of hearing, even listening to some of the interviews you've given, there's always been that common denominator of how do I translate this into the equipping of others. And so I really appreciate it's certainly inspiring, and I think inspiring to a lot of people out here in the audience who are looking for that type of assistance and getting a leg up and learning from your experiences. So I appreciate you sharing that. We mentioned it over at the table. I just got back from an ill-advised trip to Washington, D.C. I did book this well in advance of the government deciding that they didn't want to work anymore. Took my wife and children. We were Atlanta Airport is lovely this time of year. 8 hours of the layover was just delightful. But one of the things I did notice, and of course I have 3 children, 15-year-old daughter, 13-year-old daughter, 10-year-old son, is the amount of technological advances, even in flying and going to another city, engaging new technologies that even months before were not readily available, or certainly whether it's AI, or some of the new communicative technologies that we see. There's all sorts of disruption in our day-to-day life with new technology. So I'm curious, from your expertise and your experience, certainly with Google, and certainly with some of the successes you've had in companies that you've started and have resourced well, where do you see with this new technology, what does it mean to be an innovator in a market that moves so quickly, where technology is changing so quickly? How do you encourage someone to be an innovator during a time like this?
Well, I try to keep an optimistic point of view about the pace at which things are changing. It's a dizzying pace, even for me, someone who's in the space, reading, understanding, and meeting with companies, seeing what's happening. It's moving very, very fast, and I think the positive of that is that the barriers to entry are much lower than they were. When Dr. Nash Stevens and I started PartPick, we were developing on an iPhone 3. The system that we were using, it took time. We would have to program something and go for lunch and come back and see how it worked. So even in that time, it's been 10 years since we were really in the depths of building PartPick. Things have changed so much. And the same system that we built 10 years ago, someone could probably build something similar in minutes today, based on the algorithms that are available and some of the products that are out there. So to me, that presents a huge opportunity for people who, like me, maybe don't have a tech or engineering background and have a great idea. I was fortunate that I was able to find Ashley, and she was willing to support me and join me in building PartPick. But everyone doesn't necessarily have access to brilliant engineers who can help them. And I would say today, the path to get a prototype built is just much shorter. We've invested in a company called A0, shameless plug, A0.dev, and you can prompt an app and get an app built and in the App Store within, let's say to be generous, half an hour. And so that is just mind-blowing when you think about what that opens up in terms of possibilities for anyone, everyday person who has a great idea to build something and get it in people's hands. So to me, that's a huge opportunity. It's really exciting. It's just a matter of, do you have the
So I appreciate an iPhone 3. I, for one, miss the Motorola Razr because it was so much more fun to hang up on people with that than it is now when you just hit a button. It's just not as, there's not as much of an emphasis on the hang up as there was when you got to fold the phone up. Where do you get, so this is, I think where you are now, where you can look into somewhat of a technological crystal ball. Where do you see the next disruptions in technology? Obviously, AI has moved in and infiltrated almost everything that we do. Even in flying to Atlanta, AI is, if you could have heard the gentleman having a conversation with the AI customer service rep from Delta on the flight, it was pretty amazing. He was not so amused, but I certainly was. Where do you see other disruptions coming on the horizon, and how can we be best prepared to be involved in that disruption in a positive way?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm thinking a lot about is the externalities of AI. AI is great in some ways, like I just talked about. You can get to a product much quicker. You can write something probably a lot easier than it may have taken you, years ago. But there is a cost to that progress. And so I'm really interested in, from a water perspective, what are the water requirements for all of these data centers that are going up because of AI? Power. We've recently made an investment in a vertical solar structure company because we believe that there have to be more ways to access power, and we have to do it in creative ways. So, water, power, workforce. Obviously, things are going to change in terms of what jobs are available to people because, like you said, there's an AI customer service rep. And so we have to think about how do we reskill and upskill the workforce so that folks have meaningful work to do and are able to provide for their families. So when I think about AI, I think, yes, there's lots of promise and possibility, but we also have to be real about the potential dangers and how that's gonna impact our daily lives and our environment. So we're, from a collab perspective, we're really interested in running down what are all the potentialities of AI and how can we invest in those areas.
Yeah, and devil is always in the details. A technological marvel can also usher in unintended consequences. And so being sure to understand that the disruption can be a positive thing and also be a negative thing. And I appreciate your position within your group of finding the ways in which you can take advantage of, in a positive way, these disruptions, while at the same time trying to figure out how we can mitigate some of those unintended consequences. So if you would, please tell us about Collab Capital. I would love to hear more of what the mission of your group is, being a managing partner there. What is the mission of Collab Capital, and what would that mean to aspiring innovators in this room?
Sure. So when I was a founder, I raised just over $2 million, and it was probably the hardest thing I'd ever done to that point. I had hundreds of meetings to get to that amount of money, and for what we were building, that was really not a lot of money. We were building a deep learning system, a deep technology, really on the cutting edge of AI, which most people weren't talking about at that time. But we had a really hard time raising capital. And it wasn't just that it was a hard time, we also had, I would say, unsavory experiences with investors. And so I made a vow to myself while I was still building Park Pig that if I ever made it on the other side of building that company, that I would become the investor that I wish I had. Because I knew the value that we had, I knew the brilliance of my team, and I thought it was a shame that investors couldn't see that. And so, luckily we were able to sell the business. It did well with Amazon, and so I was able to start angel investing shortly after selling the business. So I just put out a post to say, if there are any entrepreneurs who want to meet for breakfast, I'd love to hear what you're working on. And so I started meeting with entrepreneurs, fell in love with entrepreneurs, and started writing checks, personal checks, into some businesses. supervisor said, okay, you've done enough. Slow your roll. And so I started to think about what would it look like to make investing my next career. So got together with a friend who was also coming out of the business, selling a business, and similarly had tough experiences with investors and wanted to approach investing in a different way. And so that's really the origin story for Collab, is that we had our experience as entrepreneurs. We felt that we had a lot that we could offer to other entrepreneurs, and we felt that we could do so in a way that was not, not similar to the way that we engage with investors in our journey, but taking the lessons learned and really making a better experience for entrepreneurs. So we started Collab in 2019. We set out to raise a small $10 million fund. I'm fortunate to be a part of some amazing networks, and they told me that's not worth it. You need to go bigger. And so actually pushed the fund to $50 million, and we're successful, oversubscribed that first $50 million fund. We invested in 38 companies out of that fund. And then just earlier this year, we closed our second fund, which is a $75 million vehicle to invest in more companies. So we'll invest in 30 companies out of the second fund, and we're building an institution, so we hope to continue to amass more assets under management so we can continue to invest in great businesses.
That's amazing. I still get excited when I find a $5 bill in my dirty jeans. The kind of money you're talking about, these are real resources that are helping people make dreams a reality. The last question I'm going to ask you, because I want to make sure we have enough time for people in the audience to ask you questions as well. When I worked at Accelerate, we wanted to find ways in which we could invest in Mississippians. We're a state of 2.9 some odd million people. We're reminded every day that so many of our young people are leaving, fleeing, flooding into other markets, whether it's Atlanta or Nashville or Austin or Dallas. And I would love your perspective on what we here in Mississippi can be doing, and what advice you would give us to try to help grow the ecosystem so that small towns generate big ideas that become amazing opportunities for job growth, reinvestment into communities that need it the most. In fact, if we can find ways to help Mississippians experience generational wealth where they've never experienced that before, what can we as a state be doing? And then what advice would you have to that young entrepreneur out there in this room getting started who feels like the mountain is too steep to climb?
Yeah, as far as advice, I would say, you all have amazing talent. I would not be where I am today without a Jackson, Mississippian, Dr. Nashley Cephas. She helped me. I think we had an amazing partnership. I always say, she was the brains behind the operation. I'm pretty smart too, but she really, helped bring my vision to life. And so the first thing is that you should just know you have amazing talent here in the state. And so making sure that you nurture that talent, just to give a shameless plug to the Bean Path, I think they're doing incredible work to develop the next generation of talent, give them access to resources, teach and expose them. So making sure that you are supporting the local organizations that are already doing the great work. And then, one of the things that we do, I think about the Atlanta ecosystem, because we sometimes have that same problem in terms of people, going to Georgia Tech and then taking a job out in Silicon Valley. And a lot of people are working to make sure that the talent can stay in the city. But the biggest thing I would say is just continuing to stay tight as an ecosystem. I was really excited to hear about all the partnerships, all the people who are in the room, the universities who are engaged, these entrepreneur support organizations, making sure that you all stay connected. That's so critical. And so I think you're already doing the work, but just nurturing the talent that's here, and then continuing to collaborate across the different ecosystem players, I think is how you keep that talent here.
creates hope. And I think that's sometimes we gloss over that entrepreneurs and innovation, not only, yes, it creates financial opportunity, it creates a return on investment, tactile money coming back in, but it also generates hope for a lot of people too. And I think that's what we see it the first time I went to the Bean Path. I saw that in some of the students that were there. There's hope in their eyes. There's hope in innovation. There's hope in creativity. There's hope in being an entrepreneur and creating business. So I'm grateful for your experience and certainly grateful that you would share that wisdom with us. I do want to make sure that if you all have questions, probably way better than mine, that you have the opportunity to ask Jewel now. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask.
And while folks are coming up with the questions, Ryan, you asked me a second part of that question that you just mentioned about encouragement or what can folks do. I think that one thing that every single person can do is assess the seat that you're in and think about what connection can you make, what introduction can you make to help someone move a step further. I think a lot of times, particularly if you're working in a large corporation, you might think, I'm here at this event, I'm a supporter, but passively. But every single entrepreneur in this room, they need access to customers. They need access to partners. So my challenge to you would be to think about who do you know that you can connect someone to that can help move them just a step further. Because, as an investor, when I look at companies, what I'm looking for is who has already made a bet? Who has already said yes? So if you can help an entrepreneur get further on that journey to get to that first yes, then that's a huge and vital role to play.
Questions?
Joel, thank you. A quick question. So when you were first developing your company, I'm Jeff, by the way. When you first were developing the company, Park David, and were in that space where you're looking for your technical co-founder, can you walk through that process of like how you found the person in particular, like making sure that not just the technical fit, but also a fit for the vision and kind of the community, the company you're building?
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of a rocky road that it took me to find, actually. I wasn't successful in the first maybe 2 or 3 people that I tried, but here's what happened. I was 23 at the time when I started Pick. So I was young and I still looked like I could belong on Georgia Tech's campus, and I used that to my advantage. So I was actually studying at the time for the GMAT because I thought I was going to go to business school. And a friend of mine let me into the library at Georgia Tech. So I was, you don't have to tell them that, but I started seeing signs on campus about different entrepreneurship events, meetups, and I would go to those events and just talk to people about this idea I had. And talking to people, one introduction led to another. I started to meet professors and ask them, who are your best students in computer vision? And that led me to an introduction to actually So those are 2 tips for people who maybe are coming into building a technical product that don't necessarily have the expertise. I think it's important to tell people about what you're working on, get at least the base level understanding of what it is that you're trying to build. And like I said, now there's so many prototyping tools that you can get pretty far on your own. But if you are trying to build something that's very technical, obviously you're going to need some technical support for that. And then if you have mentors that can help you in terms of vetting talent, that's another way to get technical talent on board.
Other questions?
Hi, Jewel. Founder, your story is very inspirational. I am founder and CEO of Strands of Faith, and we create and manufacture products to bring joy to textured hair. And my question is, in February, we'll be 8 years old. We're still a bootstrap business. And what would you recommend as far as a company continuing to bootstrap versus taking that leap to consider something like venture capital or angel investment?
I would say it's a really personal decision. Oftentimes I tell entrepreneurs to close your eyes and envision what the exit looks like for your business. Does it look like you're ringing the bell at NASDAQ and you have a whole group of people around you? In that vision, you probably have to take on outside capital because it's really hard to get to $1 billion outcome on your own. Not impossible, but really, really difficult. Or does your vision of an exit look like you sitting on a beach with a pina colada, by yourself, where you have done the work but you own 100% at the end of the day, so you get to take it all home and relax. And there's shades in between that, but I think it's just really important to think about what it is that you actually want, because a lot of times people think, well, I've been in business for a while, the next step is for me to raise capital, but raising capital is just a whole nother beast. And, I think about the companies that I've invested in, there's a